All right, so today we're diving into something a little bit different.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at the Bible,
Okay.
but not in the way that you might be thinking. We're going to be looking at the book of 1 Timothy, specifically chapter 3. And this is interesting because it kind of gives us like a job description
Right.
for early church leaders. And it's pretty fascinating stuff. I think people are going to find this really interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I think so too. And it's it's a very specific context, right?
Mhm.
We're talking about the early Christian church.
Right.
And they're trying to establish themselves. They're trying to figure out, okay, what do we look like? What do we sound like? What are our values? How do we
And what
organize?
does leadership look like?
Exactly. And so this chapter really gives us this kind of window into what they were thinking.
Right. Yeah, and so it talks about bishops and deacons and all of
Yeah.
these like qualifications
Yes.
for these roles. What do you think is like the most interesting thing that jumps out at you when you read this?
Well, right off the bat, it says that a bishop needs to be irreproachable.
Irreproachable. That's a big word.
It is a big word.
What does that even mean?
Well, in their context, right? We're
Yeah.
talking about the Roman Empire.
Uh-huh.
And so to be irreproachable means that you have a really stellar reputation.
Okay.
You're not somebody who is known for shady dealings or anything like that.
So not just like avoiding sin.
Right. It's not just about personal morality.
Heck
It's
yeah.
also about your public image.
Yeah.
Because remember, Christians were often a persecuted minority.
Right.
So their leaders needed to be above reproach, so to speak.
So that people couldn't point fingers.
Exactly. They couldn't give the Romans any excuse to come after them.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, another qualification that we see is that a bishop should be the husband of one wife.
Yes, that's a famous one.
And this one has caused a lot of debate over the years.
It has.
What do you think about that one?
Well, there are a couple of ways to interpret it. Some people say it means that a bishop can't be divorced and remarried.
Right.
Others say it's more about prohibiting polygamy,
Oh.
which was common in some cultures back then.
Right.
But either way, it shows that the early church was trying to set a high standard for its leaders in terms of marriage and family life.
Yeah, and trying to maybe set themselves apart from what was considered normal back then.
Exactly. It was about creating a distinct Christian identity.
And speaking of setting themselves apart,
Yeah.
there's also this qualification about not being given too much wine.
Right. Temperance was key.
Yeah, no wild parties for these guys.
Well, not as leaders anyway. They needed to be known for their self-control,
Right.
both for their own sake and for the sake of the church's reputation.
It's interesting how so much of this comes back to reputation.
It does, doesn't it?
It's like they knew that perception really mattered, especially in a society that wasn't always friendly to them.
Absolutely. They were very aware of how they were being perceived by the outside world.
Okay, so we've got this irreproachable idea. We've got the husband of one wife thing, the not given too much wine. Are there any other qualifications that you find interesting?
Well, there's one that says a bishop should manage his household well.
Oh, yeah. So it's not just about their public life.
Right. It's about their personal life, too.
So leadership starts at home.
Exactly. They believed that if you can't lead your own family, you can't lead the church.
That makes sense. I mean, I guess that applies to lots of kinds of leadership, not just in the church, right?
Oh, absolutely. The principles are universal, even though the context is specific.
Yeah, it's like those basic principles of being responsible, being organized, setting a good example,
Exactly. And then there's another interesting one. It says that a bishop shouldn't be a recent convert.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, I think they recognized that new converts, while often very enthusiastic, might lack the experience and maturity needed for leadership.
So they're trying to avoid those kind of impulsive decisions that new converts might make.
Perhaps they wanted leaders who had been around long enough to understand the faith and the challenges of leading a community.
So it's about having that wisdom and experience.
Exactly. And finally, there's the qualification about having a good reputation among outsiders.
Oh, right. So going back to that reputation thing again.
It all ties together. They understood the importance of public image, especially for a group that was often misunderstood and marginalized.
It's like they were trying to build bridges, not walls.
Exactly. And that's a valuable lesson for any community, I think.
Now, the text also mentions women. It says that they must be worthy of respect.
Right.
But it doesn't really elaborate on their specific roles.
Yeah, it's a brief statement, but it's significant that it's there at all.
Okay.
It suggests that while women's roles in the early church were undoubtedly influenced by the patriarchal norms of the time, they were still seen as important members of the community.
So they were valued.
Yes, and we know from other sources that women played active roles in spreading the Christian message, supporting the community, and even exercising leadership in some contexts.
So despite the limitations of their culture, they were still making a difference.
They absolutely were.
Now, towards the end of the chapter, things get a little more, I don't know, mysterious, I guess.
Right. It shifts gears a bit.
Yeah. He talks about this mystery of godliness.
Yes, it's a beautiful and somewhat enigmatic passage.
It's like we're moving from practical advice to something more poetic, more theological.
Exactly. And it starts with this powerful statement, manifested in the flesh.
Wow, yeah. That's a big idea.
It is. It refers to the belief in the incarnation.
The incarnation.
Yes, the idea that God became human in the person of Jesus.
Oh, right.
This was a radical concept that set Christianity apart from other religions of the time.
And then it says, vindicated by the Spirit.
Right. Vindication here implies being proven right or justified.
Okay.
So it's saying that Jesus' resurrection and ascension were proof of his divine nature and the truth of his message.
Like he was vindicated by the events that followed.
Exactly. And then the passage goes on to say, seen by angels, proclaimed among nations, believed on in the world, and finally, taken up in glory.
Wow, it's like a whole summary of the Christian story.
It is. It's a poetic declaration of the core beliefs of the early church.
The incarnation, the resurrection, the ascension, and the mission to spread the gospel.
Exactly. It's all there in those few verses.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from those very practical qualifications for leadership to these really deep theological ideas. What do you think is the most important takeaway from all of this?
Well, for me, it's a reminder that leadership, even in a religious context, is about more than just personal piety.
Okay.
It's about integrity, it's about service, it's about wisdom.
And it's about representing and guiding a community in a complex world.
Exactly. And I think that's a lesson that's as relevant today as it was back then.
Absolutely. And it's also fascinating to see how these ancient ideas, these standards, these beliefs,
Yeah.
they still resonate with us today, even if we interpret them in different ways, you know. It makes you think about what we consider essential for leadership in our own time. The values that we hold dear, the mysteries that shape our own worldview.
Yeah.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It really is. It's a fascinating journey to explore these ancient texts and see how they speak to us across the centuries.
It is. It is. And it makes you wonder, what mysteries of faith or belief or even just, core values shape our own world today? I think that's something we're thinking about.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's another deep dive done.
Another one.
I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Me too. Always a pleasure.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.